It's Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelyle.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Talk about a makeover, Jeff. This offseason, this team, this franchise is going over a makeover. But one spot that they might not be going for the makeover look is at the quarterback position. According to Chris Mortensen today, Moshe, Jeffery Lurie has said, no, there will be no quarterback here. Let's build around Jalen Hurts. What do you make of this report by Chris Mortensen today, who, by the way, was chastised a bit by some of the local Philly beat writers, and Mortensen was standing his ground that, no, in fact, Lurie wants to keep Hurts and build around him this offseason. Very interesting report today.
Yeah, I have not known Chris Mortensen to get too many reports incorrectly when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. So I would not challenge him on what he's saying, and I think it is reflective of a pattern that we've seen over the last few years of Jeffery Lurie being more hands-on in his decision-making, and we've had this conversation before about the hiring and firing of coaches like Mike Groh. We've had this conversation before about draft picks. We've had this conversation about the vision of the franchise for long term. So clearly this falls in line with some of the things that Adam and I have been talking about on Inside the Birds for quite a while about Jeffery being, an increased presence in these kind of decisions, despite the fact that he says he's not.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing that I'm torn with here. You don't want the owner to have, kind of step into this realm, but I like the decision. Like, if I'm a fan, I'm happy with the decision of, hey, don't go after a quarterback. Give this guy a shot. Let's get him some weapons and kind of go from there. But I'm also torn that if that's the message coming from the owner, does the owner have too much say? Although, do we not know if the owner had this kind of say-so how far back into his ownership? Because if he did, then I don't have a lot of problem with it because they've had a lot of success that maybe whatever he says has some merit.
Yeah, but then you have to kind of take a dive into how much of what he demanded.
It looks like Jeff is frozen out on us here for a second. We'll see if we can't get him back into the conversation here. The point that I'm making with Jeff is essentially that if Lurie is, in fact, people say Lurie has too much say in things, but when did Lurie start to have too much say in things? How long has it been that Lurie has essentially had all of this say-so? Has it been like this ongoing occurrence? Is it something? There he is. Let's bring him back into the conversation, Geoff Mosher. All right. So, Again, how long has Lurie had all this? Like, if Lurie said, hey, let's go out and get Terrell Owens, okay, I agree with you there. If he's the guy that said, let's go draft Zach Ertz in round 2, like, all right, then fine. So when has he gotten involved? How long has he been doing this kind of?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Look, he's the owner, and he's always been an involved owner, as he's mentioned about asking questions, right? So there's always been a big part of Jeffery Lurie having an involvement with the organization. Some of the things that we're talking about in the last few years, hiring and firing coaches, draft picks, things like that, deciding who's going to be the quarterback, is not things that I've heard that Jeffrey's been involved with in the past. Of course, he was out there in Bismarck, right, for that dinner with Carson Wentz years ago because the owner wants to know who's going to be the next franchise quarterback in his team and wants to hear that out himself. And, we've had Joe Banner on our Inside the Birds TV show many times, and Joe is, since being removed from the organization, I think has been more candid, and he has said that Jeffery has always asked a lot of questions, asked the type of questions that made you know that he wants to really know what's going on from, inside out, but that he's never, quote unquote, meddled in decision making. But I think some of the things that you're hearing about and that we've reported on the last 2 or 3 years crossed the line of just being inquisitive to kind of calling the shots. And I understand what you're saying, and many people are feeling this way about they like Jalen Hurts and they want to see him be the quarterback. But I have to think, if you're rational, you want the process to be right. Because if your owner likes the quarterback, you like the quarterback, but your head coach wasn't that fond and didn't have a great.
Well, essentially, and it looks like Jeff's kind of frozen up again on us here. We'll get Jeff back to work in just a second. On that, you just said if the coach doesn't like it, is the coach hired? Like, in other words, hey, what do you think of Jalen Hurts? He's just okay. You probably aren't hiring that coach.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I never froze up. That's why I was confused. Maybe look, we don't know. We haven't heard from Nick Sirianni publicly since his press conference. And I'm not saying that he's not on board with the decision. I'm just raising the idea is if you apply it to this situation, you have to apply it to every situation. Your owner is either going to call shots or not call shots. And if you're going to be happy about him calling shots, then you can't knife him. As I wrote on InsideTheBirds.com today, you can't give him a slap on the back saying, yeah, you're with me, with my guy, Jalen Hurts, but then shove the knife in his back when you don't like his influence on a J.J. Arcega-Whiteside pick. A good owner hires the people to make the decisions so that when the people come to him for approval, he says, yes, I understand what you're doing because I trust you. That's why I hired you. Doesn't mean he can't settle a tie. I've heard of owners settling a tie between a coach and a GM or being that third and final vote. That's fine. That's going to happen. It sounds more like this is not a committee decision all the time, though, and it's more like, what does the owner want?
Okay, I want you to listen. This was Sal Paolantonio on with me right after the draft last year. I want to get your reaction to this comment here. Take a listen.
This was Doug Peterson's pick. And the dynamic within that organization is they are co-equal partners, Roseman and Peterson. Roseman makes the final call, but he is not going to do anything that Peterson hasn't bought into. That's just not the way it is. Roseman owes Peterson, and Peterson owes Roseman for that Super Bowl trophy that's in his office that we saw on draft night.
All right. So he opened it by saying this was a Doug Peterson pick. That was on referencing why they picked Jalen Hurts. Peterson wanted Hurts. Roseman says, you want Hurts? I like Hurts. We're on board. Today, Mortensen suggested that maybe Lurie was, I don't know, how did he feel about the whole Hurts thing?
It's my understanding that Howie Roseman, Jeffery Lurie were a big advocate. I think they even admitted that, right, at the press conference about using the analogy of missing out on Russell Wilson years ago to make sure that you don't miss out on a guy again that you identify that you want. And so it's my understanding that Jeffrey and Howie were in lockstep with that pick and perhaps even the driving force behind it. You know, I don't know if Doug okayed it, wasn't okay with it, or was saying he was okay because he's trying to please his bosses. You always wonder if the story changes now that roles have changed and certain guys have moved on. You wonder what they would say now. But it is my understanding that Jeffrey and Howie were big into that pick. Remember, as Adam and I have talked about on the podcast quite a lot, most teams we spoke to had Jalen Hurts rated as a round 3 and a round 4 guy. And as I've said on the podcast before, there were people in that scouting department, that front office, who were surprised and blindsided, as I've reported, when that pick was made. So that suggests to you that not everybody in the organization, top to bottom, saw that pick the same way.
Yeah. Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. How do you make the wording from Mortensen? He has instructed his group to prioritize making Hurts successful in 2021 as opposed to creating a true competition. What is prioritizing making Hurts successful? Does that say we need to draft a receiver? We need to draft a weapon? We need to does that negate defense altogether? Like, how do you read into that? The wording of that is, you know, we need to prioritize making Hurts successful in 2021.
Well, I mean, I don't read into it any one specific position or player. I read into that Jeffery Lurie wants Sirianni and his staff to grow the team the best it can around Jalen Hurts for now, whether that's giving him more weapons.
So you think the message is more to the
line.
You think the message is more to the coach or to
both? I'm sorry, to the entire team.
Like on draft day. In other words, like he's instructed his group to prioritize Hurts. Do you think that's a direct, hey, with this draft pick, don't be thinking about taking a linebacker because we got Hurts, he's our guy, and you need to get him help?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not privy to those conversations. I would imagine that means make sure you have a good offensive line and a good set of weapons. I'm sure they're not going to ignore the defense. I mean, we'll see going on. But I think what it suggests, I don't know this for a fact, suggests just by reading it, is that they know that if they want to get if they were going to try to get a quarterback, Zach Wilson's probably going to go 2. And if that happens, then you never know where Fields is going to go. It could be 3, 4, or 5. And now you're talking about moving up to get him, and even moving up just 1 spot or 2 in the draft, as we saw with the Bears and Trubisky. You still got to give up future first-round picks. It's tough to then build around any one single quarterback, right? If you're now giving up draft capital to get that quarterback. So I have to think that that's their way of saying we've got at least a guy here that we picked in the second round, and let's try to build around him. I'm not telling you that I think that that's the most sound strategy. I think the sound strategy is if the head coach believes in a quarterback, then that's the quarterback you should try to get.
What do you think of, see, I kind of read the tea leaves on this. Jalen Hurts is on the Adam Schefter podcast, these other places. Are the Eagles letting him go on podcasts if they didn't believe in him? If he wasn't their starting quarterback in their mind, are they saying, yeah, go ahead on Adam Schefter's podcast? I think he was on a couple other podcasts, by the way. I don't think it was just the Schefter. I think he was on the K Adams NFL Network podcast and another one. So he was on multiple podcasts. You think the Eagles are approving this if they didn't think he was their guy?
Well, I don't know if they went through the Eagles or they went through Hurts's representation to do that, first of all. So that's hard to tell. I do think the Eagles believe in him, but the question is, when you say the Eagles, who are you talking about? Are you talking about Jeffrey? Are you talking about Sirianni? Are you talking about Howie? As I've said, I don't think that there is a universal, unilateral, everybody's on board one opinion on Jalen Hurts. So it kind of makes it difficult to talk about this in the terms of the Eagles. It's which person from the Eagles are we referring to?
True. Yeah, I mean, this story today with Lurie essentially, and then saying, hey, and the way that Mortensen kind of really hammered it home was that the owner's the owner, and what he gets, what the owner wants, the owner gets. Jalen Hurts is the quarterback this year. They don't want to bring competition in for him, end quote. So, I mean, that to me says they're not taking a quarterback at 6, so which means, a trade out. But then the other part of it of making him most successful in 2021 would kind of say to me, you need to get him some weapons. You need to get him some people to help make him a better player. So that's that.
I mean, yeah, and it's funny because it's like, I mean, where have I heard this line before? Coming out of 2019, we need to get the roster younger. We didn't. We need to make sure Carson's got a good support system around him. They didn't. So I'm sorry, but like a lot of things they say are just words sometimes. We want a top 5 offense to be really competitive. Okay, great. You had a bottom 5 offense. It reminds me of having a decision in firing Mike Groh because you didn't like that offense that finished 12th in the NFL but was top 5 in third down and red zone.
This is the chicken or the egg conversation. They might say we brought guys in, the player wasn't good enough to get any. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, his play was
the player that they drafted too. So,
yeah. Oh, true.
They gave him a lot of money to.
Look, nobody gets absolved of some of the problems that are here. Everybody has a hand in it. I want to get your take on a few other things. You have said on this show about Brooks, and apparently there are some reports that they have talked about trading him. Now, I don't like this at all, but my question is this other team saying, we know you have cap problems and calling, or are the Eagles saying, we got to get rid of this guy because we got cap problems? In other words,
sure,
is he imperative to move if you want to get under this cap? Or are there other ways? Can you avoid moving Brandon Brooks and still get under the cap?
Probably. I definitely think you could. I mean, you can restructure him, Fletcher Cox, and then try to reach an extension with Derek Barnett that would lower the cap significantly. So it can be done. It's important to note that any trade that they make can't be legitimized until the start of the new league year, right? So you have to be compliant with the cap at the start of the league year. So if they were to trade Zach Ertz, theoretically, much like with Carson Wentz, that money doesn't move or become off the books until the start of the league year. So it doesn't help you get under the cap at that moment. to trade Zach Ertz. So that's why it does have to be through restructures or other ways, extensions. So again, with Brandon Brooks, it's the same thing. If you trade him, yes, it's more that you're trading him to try to continue to get under the cap to make other moves that you might want to make. We know they only have Jalen Hurts under contract, and they're going to need some backup quarterbacks, and they're going to need a couple of veterans here and there in free agency. So trading Brooks would be a way to continue to clear more space to have for the year, but also to try to get some kind of value in return for a guy who has probably seen his better days and is coming off major injuries, and as good as he's been, if
all right, Sports Bash Live 97.3. There he is. Moshe, you back? There we go.
Yeah, where'd you lose me at?
As good as he's been. You were right at the end there.
Yeah, I was just saying, as good as he's been, it's still a way to kind of, instead of restructuring and kicking the money down the road like they've done for a lot of guys, they wouldn't have to do it for Brandon.
Yeah, he's got 4 years left on that deal. So there's a lot of years still left for Brandon Brooks. You don't want to be paying him too much further past those 4 years. Speaking of years left on the deal, we know Zach Ertz has years left on his deal, but he will not be back here. Now, there are some reports that he could be traded in the coming days. The question would be, I saw Jeff McClain put out there that he would like to be released, Ertz, because he wants to be able to pick where he wants to play. I'm sure the Eagles they say that's fine and dandy, but if we can get something for you, we will. The question is, if teams know you're up against it, you're not getting anything. I mean, I don't know. Is shooting for a third or a fourth the best they could do, or do you think that's a pipe dream?
I think it's a pipe dream. I'm sure I would imagine that they've asked for a third, at least to start the conversation.
Yeah, we know Indianapolis doesn't have a third, and we know Seattle doesn't have a third. So those are two teams interested. They don't have a third.
They're not getting a third.
No,
I
agree.
They're not. So, I mean, maybe you can get a fourth conditional. That would be, I think, even nice too. But, I mean, if enough teams think that he's going to get cut, I can't imagine that teams are going to be scrambling to give up a whole lot for Zach Ertz.
Right. I mean, you're coming off the worst year you've ever had. You're 30 years old, and he makes $8.2 million in a year that people are cap-strapped. He makes a lot, and there's a lot of options out there. This tight end position, there's a lot of free agent options.
Well, one thing on that, though, Mike, is that any team that trade for him can take that $8 million and call it a signing bonus and divide it over three. They can sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal, divide it over so that, it's spread out and it's not a big cap hit if they cut him. Not every team does that. I'm almost talking in Eagles language now, but I mean, there's ways to make sure that cap number for the first year isn't so bad.
Right. And by the way, the other team that operates much like the Eagles are the Saints, and they are $48 million over the cap right now. So they
Yes.
operate very much like the Eagles do.
They do. And the denominator there is, in the last 2 or 3 years, neither team has reached its goal. So,
yep. Mickey Loomis is the longtime GM of the Saints. Heck, he's been there since I feel like I was a kid.
Yeah. It helps to have Drew Brees as your quarterback for 20 years. You're gonna be employed for quite a while.
So keep your eye on that. The Eagles are still trying to make moves. Check out the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast, and they'll have a new edition coming up. And you also have some new news and shows going on.
We definitely do, man. We've got the next Q&A coming out. That'll be Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. They're going to go through Eagles wide receivers. People are asking, so we're like, let's do it. Let's give the people what they want. So they're going to break down the whole wide receiver situation. And then, of course, Greg Cosell is going to join us starting March 30th, once a week for 6 weeks to do a draft show called Inside the Draft with Greg Cosell. That'll be me, Adam, and Greg Cosell just hitting the draft as hard as we possibly can. And, Cosell is one of the best, if not the best, non-NFL employee at breaking tape down. So I'm excited about that.
All right, follow them and check out Inside the Birds podcast. A new one dropped this morning, and the next one will be out on Thursday. They talk about the Kelsey and Slay deals. They have intel on the quarterback and wide receiver workouts and who else will be restructured, what is next there, plus Football at 4 all week long when something happens with this Eagles team. We've got you covered. The offseason, the NFL offseason begins on the 17th. So next next Wednesday is the opening of the new league year. We will be all over that here on Football at 4 and the guys at the Inside the Birds podcast. All right, pal, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, my brother. Have a good one.
Mosher's back Wednesday. Andrew's in tomorrow. Kaplan on Friday. The Sports Bash Live all over football with football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.